You're not nervous. Welcome to Different is Normal. I'm Suzanne Barnett, your host, and I'm so pleased and honored to have a very fabulous lady on the show. Lady, woman, chick, whatever, right? Her name is Beje Schweitzer, and Beje is the founder and director of a company called SLM, which means Schweitzer Learning Methods. And I'm so happy that you're on the show, Beje.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're a fascinating lady, of course. But before we talk about your company, tell how many jobs that you've had.
Oh, my goodness.
Tell.
Oh, I don't think I could actually count them.
Well, don't count, but they're all.
But
yeah, go ahead.
I've done so many different things, starting from when I was a kid, and I lifeguarded and got my WSI at a young age, so I was able to teach swimming. I did that for 30 years, on and off. And I have, I worked in a department store, when you had to make money, you did whatever. I even got a job waitressing one time when I was out of work. I had so much trouble because I had a college degree, and finally somebody said, oh, just go in and chew gum and just tell them you have a high school diploma and you'll get the job, and I did. So I did that one time. But taught school, that was what I was trained to do, really, was to be a teacher, and always loved it. I was secondary certified, but because I'm music and drama, I can go to all grades and have.
But didn't you have a yellow cab company?
And then then had lots of adventures with my ex-husband.
I bet.
We owned 3 weekly newspapers in eastern Colorado, and we owned an AM radio station in Tennessee, and we owned, yes, Palo Alto Yellow Cab, San Mateo Yellow Cab, Bay Area Sedan and Limousine, and I now have Bay Area Sedan service that I kind of do on the side, and no more limousines. And then I started a company that we called Bay Area Lift Van, and that was for people that were wheelchair bound, and needed transportation and didn't want to wait for Samtrans.
So my next question is, what haven't you done?
Probably a lot of things,
yeah.
But yeah, I've done a lot. Oh, I found out actually when I was probably in my 20s, when I first went to be a waitress, and I'd never done that before. I found out that if you are willing to learn something, well, you can. You just have to be willing to learn. And you just have to find the people that can teach you and train you, and just be willing. When we had our newspaper business, right away we had the gal that did all of the letterhead for us. We had a machine to do that. AB Dick 360 is what it was. They don't probably use them anymore. But she just said, oh, I think I'm going to quit. And we said, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? Because we were the county seat and we needed to do all this letterhead. And, right away the finger went to me. They said, why don't you learn? And I said, okay. So, yeah, I learned to do that. To do the camera work.
And, well, you're such a positive. And my next question is, where do you get your energy?
I'm really not sure, but I have always had, and in fact, when I went back to some school yearbooks that when I was first teaching, my motto has always been, if you look for the good, you'll find it. Of course, if you look for the bad, you're going to find that too, but I don't do that.
But you don't do that.
I don't do that. I look for the good, and I do find it, and I find it everywhere. And I think when you're happy and you're upbeat, it keeps you young, it keeps you healthy.
I totally agree.
And I do take vitamins and minerals and herbs.
Now, tell about SLM and how you got...
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I was actually dyslexic as a child, but because I grew up back in the 40s and 50s, they didn't know about it then. And so it wasn't until I had my first daughter and she was getting ready for school, and I realized that I knew there was something wrong, and that she was behind where she should be, and that she struggled. She struggled with language, she struggled with writing, and so I knew there was something wrong. And they were just starting to talk about dyslexia. And I had that in the back of my mind that perhaps that's what it was. So I had her tested. And she tested for dyslexia, but she wasn't far enough behind for the public schools for them to work with her. And they said, you know, maybe in a couple of years, if she's 2 grades behind, we can do something. I don't want her to be 2 grades behind. I want her to, you know, do well right now. And so I was actually, the year after that, was teaching at Valley Christian High School in San Jose. Went to a conference, and of course, you know, the vendors are there and they have all their booths. And I saw this one and it said, you know, something like, does your student have messy handwriting, trouble remembering things, all these delayed speech, all these different symptoms. And they were all, I could just go right down the list, and they were all my daughter. So I began talking with the gentleman that was behind the booth, and he happened to be the president of the company. And he very sweetly told me he would come and test my daughter. And he did. And he said, yes, she's definitely dyslexic. He said, I have a program that would be great for her, but I have nobody in the Bay Area to teach that program. And he said, would you be willing to learn? And I said, of course. I mean, what you naturally want your daughter to get ahead.
What is dyslexia?
Dyslexia? You know, there's a lot they don't know about it. There are things that they know, for instance, that they can see it occurring again and again in families. Whether it's actually inherited or not, how do you know? But they can see that there's a pattern that families will have it. So there's a good chance then, for instance, that my grandchildren would be dyslexic. But what they do know is that, especially when the children are young, and all children when they're young, you have your right brain and your left brain. And the right brain does, you know, all of the creative things, and your left brain does all the scientific and math type things. And as you develop as a child, and by the time you're 6 or 7, then your brain begins to function as one unit. And so at that point in time, you know, you're able to comprehend, you know, questions, answer, and you can come up with the answers and so on. But when you're dyslexic, that brain does not function as one unit. And that's where the problem occurs. And so it's flopping information from one side to the other, back to the other, trying to look for the answer. And this is why children then have so much difficulty when they're dyslexic with whether it's writing or speech or the math, or they don't see letters backward. People think they see the letters backward in the book. They don't see the letters backward, but when they write, they often write them backward. And that's just a perception because of this brain dysfunction, and you have to cross the midline of the body. Now, one thing when I did the training, you know, for this program, when I was working with my daughter, trying to, she didn't really let me. But when I was training for that, that was the biggest thing that he saw as a plus for their program, was that they always did physical exercises to force the brain to work as one unit. And I do that today. That's one thing that I kept from his program and put in Schweitzer learning methods, and I've added a few exercises of my own that he didn't have that still cross the midline. Now, the purpose of doing that is that when I have my hands out like this side is all on one side and this side is all on one side. But when I do this and cross over, now if I'm going to watch my hand cross over, then I've crossed the midline and I've forced the brain to work as one unit. And you can actually prove it to people that they're stronger if both sides of their brain are using it once, physically stronger. And of course then they're mentally stronger too if both sides are kicking in. And I do that, I show people that by having them, you could do this at home if you want, stare at parallel lines, and I have them put their arms out, and if they're staring at the parallel lines, I can force their arms down to their side, or at least down a ways. I did that with a man the other day, and I couldn't get him down very far, but I was able to bring them down. He was trying to resist me. But if they look at the center of an X, now it asks the whole brain to work as one unit. They can do the same thing, put their arms out. and resist you, and they can resist you. They have the strength physically because the brain is now, the whole brain is saying resist, resist, resist.
So it's really getting
the brain has to function as one unit.
I see.
And
I never knew that.
That's the problem for dyslexics, is they don't have that. And
you teach. What do you do with the people?
I start with the exercises. And once their brain is functioning as one unit, because if you begin your session with exercise and get that in place, then of course for the reading, because many of them have trouble reading and spelling, strong phonics base. That's what you need. You need the tools. And sight reading will never work for a dyslexic because they're never going to memorize that much stuff. So they've got to have the tools. You give them the phonics, and you have them just learn to put little pieces together. You blend a vowel and a consonant, and then you blend a consonant and a vowel. And I use the hand, and I put the vowels on the hand for the children. And they do exercises with their hand, and they'll go like A-E-I-O-U, A-E-I-O-U, A-E-I-O-U. I make them do everything correctly 3 times. And the reason I do it 3 times is because you know yourself, if you are wanting to learn something, if you just say it once right and once wrong, you might forget which one was right and which one was wrong.
Exactly.
So all of my students do everything correctly 3 times.
And that also organizes, so to speak, the brain.
Right.
Yeah.
It does.
You have to tell about what you do, the positive stuff. I think it's so
the reward.
The reward
right
system.
Now, okay, I will tell you that, I did start the Schweitzer learning methods because as I worked with the other program, and it was an effective program, it wasn't very fun. It wasn't much fun. And I'm a great one for having fun.
I can see that, Beje. Yeah.
And the kids, they like to work with me because I can tell them honestly, I sat in their shoes. I know what they're going through. I know how difficult it is. But let's make it fun, because if it's fun, then we're going to learn and we're going to have fun. Now, I have a very strong reward method for children when I'm working with them. I tutor in groups, I tutor individually, I tutor semi-privately, and just most recently I'm starting to do workshops to teach parents how to do some of the things that I do. But I believe in a reward method, and what I do is tell them that they must do certain positive things, and when they do their exercises, they get a point. And when they write for me, they get a point. And when they read for me, they're getting a point. And do the phonics, they're getting a point. And they get all these points as we have our session. But I also give them for free at the beginning of the session 5 points for good behavior. But they can lose them. And so this is how I keep control of my group very easily. Because if a child decides not to do what I've asked them to do, or to be stubborn, or to throw a little fit of some kind, then I just calmly look over and say, sorry, you just lost a behavior point, and we erase. And they know what that means, because the points at the end of the day mean tickets. And I give them tickets, and once a month I take in a little goodie basket, of all these little dollar toys and things. And they love it, and they buy them with their tickets. So,
how'd you come up with that idea, Beje? That's so great. Be good for adults, too, for many different things. Yeah.
Well, I had a very unusual thing happen. I have 4 children. I have 2 boys and 2 girls, the perfect family. And when I was pregnant with my oldest daughter, my sons were 4 and 3. And 4 days before my due date for my oldest son, or for my daughter, my oldest son was rushed to the hospital. And I have this little medical book, and I'd looked up everything. And the only thing I didn't know, because I'm not a doctor or a nurse, is I had no idea if he had an enlarged spleen. And so as I read in the book, he had every symptom of leukemia, except that I didn't know about that. And so I was really concerned, and so his dad took him to the hospital, and he called me a little bit later, and he said, I don't know what's going on, but they're doing all this work stat, and he said, the only thing the doctor said is he has an enlarged spleen. And I said, oh no. And he said, what's wrong? And I said, he may have leukemia. And so I was really, really worried. Well, they were even more worried when I went to the hospital and they saw how big I was and that my due date was 4 days away. And it turned out he was very, very fortunate. Actually, thousands of people prayed for him, and I still say he went in with leukemia and came out with ITP. But there was a doctor.
What is ITP?
It's a, you know, the word is like this.
Oh, okay.
And it's immune something.
Oh,
but,
I see. Okay.
You know, I'm dyslexic. I can't remember those things. But it's like leukemia, but it'll run its course in 6 months. But you have to be so cautious. It's where the I believe the red cells are eating the white cells, but when they do the bone marrow test, they can tell that it's not leukemia because there's a lot of new white cells being produced. I think I'm right, but I'm not, you know, my scientific brain isn't really.
So what happened then?
Well, then they said, okay, here are all the cautions. This child can't be around other children because he can't catch a cold or the flu or he'll die. If he falls or bumps himself in any way, rush him right to the hospital. The doctor will see him immediately. They even ended up sending a lot of his blood work to Stanford. He had to go in for blood tests where they drew the blood. And you can just picture this. I have this infant and this 4-year-old, and he has to have this blood test, and he knows that needle's coming. Oh. I had some really difficult days, but we did survive. But the thing was that it didn't take a 4-year-old too long to realize that nobody could do anything to him. He can't be touched. He can't be spanked in any way. Not even a little swat. You couldn't do anything. And I thought, how in the world can I discipline this child? Because he started getting out of hand. You know, 3-year-old brother, hey, fun to pick on. So I decided with a chore chart, and I decided I just needed help, and I needed help from them. And and I might add, at that time, his dad worked for 911 and did graveyard work. So I spent my day going, shh, Daddy's sleeping, shh, Daddy's sleeping. So try that one with 3 little ones. And so I had to have a way to handle the situation where the burden was on them. It couldn't be on me anymore. And I thought, how do you get the burden on a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old? So I came up with this chore chart, and what I did was I gave them just tons of little things that they could do. You know, make your bed, eat all your breakfast, comb your hair, just everything I could think of. Feed the dog, water the plants, bring in the paper, just anything I could think of. And finally I thought, oh, I've got to have something on behavior in here. And so I had say something kind, do something kind for someone, be a helper. I had all of these little positive things then on their chore chart. And the way I did that is each boy had a chart, and each day, if they did that thing, they got a little smiley face. And if they didn't, they got a little frown. But then I realized that, you know, the older boy didn't care if he had a lot of frowns. So I said, got to do something about that. So I had lots of these little positive things that they had to do. And I said, okay, here's the deal. If you have a frown, it's going to get subtracted. That point gets subtracted from a smiley face. And if you have more than 3 frowns, you just get a big fat 0. And what I did was that was how they got their allowance. So at the end of the day, well, at the end of the week, we counted up, and it was so many pennies each day, and then that's how they got their allowance.
You are very creative, and you've
So I've implemented
you've
that.
implemented
Yeah.
that into what you do
That positive,
with the children.
that reward
yeah.
method. Yeah.
What do you do if an adult is dyslexic?
You know, I've had a few come to me and get tested. They haven't chosen to tutor with me. I mean, I could. I think sometimes adults feel a little bit uncomfortable even knowing that. But what I do is, if they don't want to tutor, I mean, I had one fellow that couldn't read, and I just told him again and again, I really want to help you read, but he just was a little too embarrassed, I think. I mean, it's hard for an adult, let's face it. I mean, it was the same thing teaching swimming. I could teach children all day long, but I tried to teach an adult once, and she could, as long as she knew she could touch, she could swim. But the minute she was in deep water, she couldn't swim. It was mind over matter, and that's the problem for an adult. They have this mindset.
But could an adult with dyslexia be helped?
Oh yes.
Oh really?
Oh surely. And I would give, now these folks that didn't do the tutoring, I gave them a lot of hints on things that they could do. And from the test, when I test someone, I can tell quite a bit about them. Now, for one thing, and I didn't mention this earlier, but it's kind of important, and that is that we all learn with our eyes, with our ears, and with our hands, hands-on. It's, you know, auditory, kinesthetic, and visual. But rather than using the terms, I say eyes, ears, and hands-on. But the thing is that when you're dyslexic, one of those is going to be your strength, and it's going to be a powerful strength. You're just going to have way more ability to learn that way than any other way. And one is going to be a terrible, terrible weakness. And your other will be kind of in between, but not too strong either. So what I do is I teach, like when I'm working with children and when I'm telling adults, you need to use your strength to build your weakness. So when I'm teaching a child and the child is very visual, but maybe very, very weak with kinesthetic, I have them doing a lot of things then with their hands to learn. First we learn the item with the visual, but then I go right to the hands and we do that too. So everything, actually when I'm teaching, everything they do all three ways. And it'll build up the strength in the weaker areas. Plus it teaches you how to cope. For instance, I myself am a kinesthetic learner, and my worst is auditory, and well, visual is pretty bad too. But when we had the cab company and we'd get a really busy day, and then they'd say, Beje, go answer phones. And I said, but I can't. Oh no, it's busy, we need you. But I knew, because I knew myself, that if I did that and I'm under pressure and under stress, I'm going to mix those numbers around. Because the first thing we ever did was take down a phone number or an address. And I knew that I shouldn't do that, because that's my weakness. And I kept trying to get through to them. This is not the time for me to do something. You don't understand. I can't. This is when I'll make a mistake. And of course, when I still had to go in, then I always read the number back and made sure that the person said that that was the number, or just made up my mind I have to go slowly. But these are things that you learn with dyslexia, that you must try a different avenue.
And
go down a path.
Yeah, and you're able to lead these people.
Right,
yeah.
Right. When I test them, I find out where their strength and weakness is. That's part of the test.
So it's very good to be positive about your strength, but you absolutely need to work on
the weakness.
We do anyway, don't
Right.
we? I mean, even if we're not dyslexic.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, you know, this is why, you know, there are sometimes, I shouldn't say I get amused, but some people will say, you'll hear parents talking and they'll say, oh, your kid's got to have so-and-so next year because she's just the absolute best teacher. And, oh, my child just excelled and da-da-da. And then, you know, the other parent's jumping through hoops to get the child in the class, and they don't do very well. And then they go, oh, well, I guess she doesn't like my kid. But it's not that at all. What happened is even teachers, of course, are going to teach in their strength area because that's their best way of teaching. And if their best way of teaching is the child's best way of learning, boy, have you got a match. But if her strength is his worst weakness, he doesn't get it. And unfortunately, a lot of teachers don't understand this. And if a child said, I didn't understand, or they were, you know, if you don't understand, raise your hand. What do? They say it louder. They're not hard of hearing. They didn't get it.
Yeah. Beje, guess what?
Our time's up.
Yes. You have been so informative. And I just met you, you know, just an hour ago. And you do exude all this positive energy.
Well,
so I think I'm going to go get tested by you. So really. And thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure.
Really. And I always say this. We have a great crew. They work so hard. It's all volunteer. And I just really appreciate being here at KMVT. And Ted Milkey is the producer, and he came up with Different is Normal, and I'm so proud of him, and he's a teenager. And of course, I want to thank our audience for watching. Please keep watching. And I can't wait to see you next time. Bye-bye.